everyone. I think since morning we have been talking about how important public sector organizations are from India perspective and from economy, what value add it brings to our overall environment. I think I'll go through my presentation. I'll primarily just focus on how important and what role IT can bring into public sector environment as well. Because this IT can be a game changer when we talk about any of the organizations where the business is dependent on IT. So IT is not just now looked in isolation or just look like a IT component, but I think it's more or less become a part of business initiative in most of your organizations today. And I'm sure, I think you know, today when you go back to your organization, you realize that any application or system which is running in your environment, which is business centric, somewhere back end there is an IT engine running there and providing a complete support. So I'll just quickly go through it, and it is not just to say what we are and what we do, but it's just to talk about that. I think from India perspective, we have been there for almost 14-16 years now, and we understand the requirement of India government from an Govt project perspective. We have been also associated very closely with the public sector environment and understand the need of the hour and make IT solutions more aligned to the requirement of customer rather than just working in isolation. So that's where we come from. And today you look at, when we talk from an IT perspective in public sector environment, I think there are few key things which have become. So the IT is more dependent when we talk about from whether it's network and communication services. The interaction between service and citizen is the key thing. So today if you look at most of the users, and when you look at the service being provided by your organization, unless that is highly available to all internal users, there is no way you can provide the right set of services outside your organization. So I think we have to first start within and make sure that everything is available, because today when we talk about, it is about service economy for the users. Today you look at, we have moved from a stage where we were just dependent on few systems in isolation, but I think today we look at, you are able to use most of your critical applications from your own handheld devices and execute those business related decisions. So it is very important to make sure that how that is being made successful, how this is being enabled for the users to carry out their business related tasks on a daily basis from that perspective. Just wanted to give a perspective because why I touched on ERP perspective, because most of the public sector when we talk about, somewhere have a business engine which is more dependent on an ERP environment. So I just took a slide from one of the leading ERP players. They're saying 16 trillion of the retail purchases happen or touch a particular ERP system. 74% of the global revenue transaction go through a ERP, and in your own organization you will realize that the same lies true. Unless your ERP system is performing to the expectation of the business, you may not be able to deliver the results what you were hoping for. Typically when you talk about from ERP perspective, it's a complex environment. There are continuous changes, technology which you have to implement around your business environment. Obviously, speed is what you have been always looking at, that how can you deliver those services much faster which you have been committed, and move away from a reactive sense of managing your IT infrastructure to becoming more proactive and not just look now IT in isolation. I think it is time to look at it in totality and say, okay, if IT component, one smallest of IT component goes down, how is it going to impact your business services which you have been committed from that side? So failure is not an option today when we talk about from ERP. Maybe some of you have already implemented, some already have plans to implement a system in Planet. I'll come to the point that we are not really a ERP vendor, but we understand the criticality of maybe having ERP kind of an environment in your place. So when something goes down, look at the time when it is just gone to identify and detect a particular problem which has happened in your environment. It's a known fact, and it says, earlier speaker also mentioned that they moved away from a human system to an IT-enabled system so that things become less error-prone and you are able to actually make it much more efficient from there. So they can be, it may not directly sometimes may be able to relate to a revenue loss, but when it comes to saying reputation of organization, when a IT system goes down, your reputation of the organization is also at stake. So you want to make sure that the systems are available at any point of time and delivering those business services. So this is a scary slide, but don't be really scared about it, because today when you look at from an end user perspective, he just had to click open a form, give proper inputs to carry out his normal duty, but it's not just end of the story. At the back end, when you look at this complex slide, there is whole set of applications working together. There is a IT environment which is supporting that application environment. So the platforms, whether it's physical, virtual, whether it's on cloud, so that's another area. And at the lowest layer, when you go, you look at where is all this running. Maybe it's running at your data center where it is, you have to manage also from a data center perspective. So you, from a manageability perspective, the challenge becomes is from a single window, and I'm sure maybe many of you don't have this issue because you are primarily looking at the result from that application, but the IT team which is managing your environment have this nightmare of how do I manage such a complex environment which has applications, network, systems. I have to look at data center availability also, not just from IT, but how much of cooling is happening, how clean is my IT data center, and finally give right perspective to the right user. Maybe somebody just want to look at a very high level view, give him a very high level executive view, but to each of the respective teams, you want to drill down and say, database team should get view to their database environment, application team should get a right perspective to their application environment, and how's everything performing from that perspective. So you want to have this kind of a, and there are today, that's what we talk about, that's where we bring in expertise, saying how do you manage and make your complete monitoring environment very flexible for you to bring. And all in real time, because that's what you want. And if this is a graphical representation of a data center, maybe you want to have it like that. Know where the problems are happening in the data center, drill down to that level and fix those issues so that the business never get impacted from that perspective. I'll quickly just touch on one of the, like I mentioned about ERP, maybe a backbone in most of your organization. Today I'm taking an example of one of the SAP, which is one of the leading ERP players over there. Today when your business is dependent on any of the ERP applications, what you want to do is you want to understand any challenges and modify and rectify those problems. So if you talk about what SED as one of the components, I'll just quickly cover, but not from a product perspective. You want to have a real-time visibility, what's happening, how many transactions are happening in your environment. Is there any performance and availability issues? When the user commits on a particular transaction, do I have to really wait, or do I have a clear visibility in terms of what's happening in my environment? And even whether it is a SAP environment, non-SAP environment, you want to have a similar look and view of your complete application environment, saying, I should know where the problem is and go and just fix that problem right away from there. So what it provides you, completely deep dive visibility from not just going to a particular level, how scalable, how complex your environment can be. It can go down from collecting the right set of parameters, because that's what your IT team needs. Right set of visibility into right set of metrics, so that if you have to fix those problems, just go and enable your IT team to do that. Intelligent analysis, not just look at, because when you talk about your business today, it's a complex environment, and that application is not one single application. It's links to so many things, because you, even in your environment today, you have a team managing databases, applications, systems, platforms and all that. But from your perspective, when the business view comes in, you want to look at everything in totality and see how do you manage that kind of an environment. And have, like as I spoke about, how do you have customized view for your own IT environment and business users and manage it completely from there. So move away from having a reactive approach to a proactive approach and deep dive into your own IT environment, and that's what we can bring onto the table from that perspective. So just another last slide, just to talk about from not just managing and monitoring IT environment is enough, but how secure it is. Today, when everybody knows in the world, from the India economy perspective, public sector is a very critical organization which is holding on our economy as well. And everybody is there to bring down those systems which are running in your environment. You want to make sure only right people who are authorized and have access gets into your environment and do any of this parameter. Even sometimes you want to restrict super users in your environment and make sure only the right people who get authorized and authenticated get into your environment. So you want to have end-to-end security also perspective, not having just putting the same perspective again, saying don't look at security again in isolation, saying every application, oh, I'm able to protect them initially, but somewhere there is always loopholes which people figure out. So you want to look at security in totality, have a proper security policy in place, and implement security from that perspective. So I just wanted to bring some of the thoughts forward, and any point of time, I think if you want to connect with us and have further discussion around whether from a manageability perspective or from security perspective, me and my team will definitely be there to help you on that. Thank you very much.